I love this one. If sports parents got trophies, thank you for speaking about this because we're in sports, youth sports culture.
Yes.
Cher's kids are in dance and horseback riding. So like there's, we're involved in like
Yeah.
activities. But this mom got a trophy for only went to the wrong field once. This mom gets shuttled stinky children all over the region, 2026 season. This mom gets washed the dirty uniform at 10 p.m. despite really not wanting to get up off of the couch. This is real and good for her night before. Um, and then this dad got everyone where they needed to be somehow. And this dad provided hugs after tough losses. I love that. This mom ran a full service restaurant out of her car. Just so gross, the French fries that are in the crevice. I can't. And like years later, that are in the
Oh,
crevice of the seats. I'm like, this is gross.
this
This dad found the lost cleat, and this mom remembered it was my turn to bring the snacks. This dad did not yell at any other parents. I'd like to meet this gentleman. All sports parents deserve trophies. Go team, go.
Yeah. So that was a collaboration I actually did with Skylight, the calendar, which I am a big fan of. But it was a paid sponsorship. But and we were really trying to talk about the mental load, and in that case, we're like, let's bring some dads. I'm always like showing the moms carrying it, but like, we're trying to also show that dads can carry the mental load.
Be happy, 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 happy. Keep your chin up.
Welcome back, Mama fans. We are so excited to present to you part one with Mary Catherine Starr, graphic designer, yoga teacher, author, illustrator, and creator of the wildly popular Mom Life comics. Through her honest, humorous, and deeply relatable comics, Mary Catherine has built a community where mothers feel seen, heard, understood, and a little less alone. Mary Catherine's creative journey has taken her from Atlanta to New York City to Washington, D.C., and eventually Cape Cod, where she and her husband are raising their two children. Along the way, she traded corporate marketing for a life rooted in creativity, teaching yoga, launching businesses, creating greeting cards, blogging, podcasting, and eventually discovering an unexpected passion for comic storytelling. What began as a way to process the overwhelming realities of motherhood grew into Mom Life Comics, an online community that resonates with thousands of parents navigating the invisible work of parenthood. Her first comic memoir, Mama Needs a Minute, was released in 2025. In part one of this conversation, Mary Catherine shares the surprising story of how Mom Life Comics began, why authentic storytelling resonates so deeply with mothers, and how creativity became both a personal outlet and a powerful form of advocacy. Together, we explore the mental load of parenting, the realities that no parenting book prepares you for, and why honest conversations around motherhood matter more than ever. Mary Catherine's illustrations are so creative, so spot on motherhood, and she was just an absolute joy to have on the pod. Let's dive in with Mary Catherine. I'm so blown away by what you're doing with Mom Life Comics.
Thank you.
It is so creatively, like the visual creativity, the content, you don't miss a mark. You cover everything, all these parenting topics. But I really love that you cover everything from like, imbalance in female male culture, in motherhood imbalance, in kids sports, and
mental load.
It's you cover everything. So your page, when we're looking through it, I find is so various, such variety of topic. And
Well, I never run out of, there's so much inspiration out there, sadly.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
it's coming at us from every direction. So there's a lot, I feel like there's always so much to cover, and I'm never at a loss for what to talk about. It's like there's too much.
There,
Sadly.
there is too much. Like, do you sometimes feel like where do we even begin?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially with the news, like I go in and out of, kind of making comics about current events or politics or about maybe something, stuff that's out there about motherhood, policies or whatever's in the news about motherhood. And I have to like dip in and out of that because that if I start to get too, tuned in terms of my comics, I mean, I'm always paying attention, but if I start to do too many comics or too much content about current events or politics, I get really stressed. It's like I can't stay on top of it. It feels like it's just like a fire hose. And so that is something that I feel like I I dip my toe in and out of. And if something feels like, if I have a really good idea about something, or if it feels like something I just can't ignore, I might jump in and make a comic or, do
Yeah.
something about that. But, my through line is always motherhood and the mental load. And then here and there, I say like, okay, I've got to talk about this current event. But that's where it does feel overwhelming when I start to get too involved in making content about what's happening politically in the world.
Yeah, I mean, because there's just like so much bad news.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
And frankly, like women are being, we're being attacked from every angle, and especially, mothers. And so that's when it starts to get really overwhelming, and when I try too hard to talk about that stuff because it's so emotional in a different way. It's easier for me to talk about early motherhood right now that I've gotten a little distance. My kids are 9 and 6. So I can talk about that, with a little distance, but with current events and with politics, like we don't get any distance ever. There's never a time to look back and say, oh, well, now I'm going to comment on this now that I have a little perspective because it just
yeah,
keeps coming. So it feels hard. It feels hard for me. And I'm always really inspired by people who are making art constantly about what's coming out of the news because I just don't know how they have the bandwidth to do that all the time.
to do that. Yeah. Well, can you tell us how you got started doing this? Like, what is your background and how did you start creating these comics that are just influenced so many of us that come across them?
Thanks. Well, yeah, I mean, it was definitely like an accident that I started making comics. I mean, I was an art major, I've always been considered myself an artist in different ways, and I'm a graphic designer, and that's what I've been doing for, I've had my own graphic design business for the past like 10 years. So I've been doing that a long time. And I also was like, an old school blogger back in the day. So writing, not drawing, but I did blogs and I had a blog and I shared a lot of my art on my blog. And I also talked at that time about just life. I wasn't a mom at that point, but so I think, I mentioned those things because I think people who were blogging got really used to sharing their lives online and sharing
Mm.
like the challenges of daily life. And at that time I was talking a lot about, anxiety and being a person who, had dealt with body image issues. And so I got really comfortable just like talking about the stuff that was hard through
Mm.
blogging. So I think that where I've ended up, that plays a big part in that. But actually it was just, I still have my blog as I was a new mom and my first few years of my kids' lives. And I got I have it right here. I got I got this little drawing tablet. And I actually got it because I had like an Apple gift card and I didn't know what to buy with it. And I was doing graphic design, so I was like, well, maybe I'll get this little, tablet that I can draw on with this pen that it comes with, and I might use that sometimes in like logo design or something. So I got that, and I just started kind of messing around trying to learn this new technology that I'd always been drawing everything by hand up until that point. And I got really into it. I thought it was really fun. And so I started making these little illustrations just for my blog. And they were really because I was talking a lot about motherhood at that point on my blog, and I was really in it. I was really struggling. That was when I had really young kids, and I was posting all these blog posts about how hard it was, and I didn't really have any photographs or images I wanted to share with them. And I had a personal Instagram where I would kind of talk about what I was talking about in the blog. And so I was just looking for like, how can I, if I'm talking about this horrible night of, that we had with my daughter, I don't want to put up a picture of like the two of us just smiling, looking perfect. Like that didn't go well with it. So I was like, maybe I'll draw some little illustrations that are kind of like, capture the hot mess feeling of this time period. And so I started making these little illustrations with that graphic drawing tablet. And I started sharing those to Instagram with some of these kind of, motherhood explorations I was doing on my blog. And I noticed that when I shared those illustrations, I didn't even call them comics at that point. I noticed they were getting shared a lot just from my personal Instagram and tons of comments and lots of people, saying kind of the stuff we all are used to now, which is me too, I feel that way as well. And so I just kept doing those. And I started doing these little illustrations and sharing them in January of 2020. So of course, a few months later, the pandemic hit, and I think, all moms were in crisis, and my life, got 10 times harder. And I was trying to run my own business from home with my two little kids, as we all were. And so I started making these almost at that point more like a therapeutic outlet. It was just like a creative outlet for, I was so overwhelmed. I felt like I just had to talk about it. And so I made these little drawings to do that. And they felt really like a really low stakes kind of fun and playful, but also sometimes emotionally intense way to talk about how much I was struggling. And so that was the beginning of what happened and what became Mom Life Comics. But it came out of truly just like accidentally getting this drawing tablet and looking for a way to kind of talk visually about how I was feeling.
The happy accident of it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
They're so creative, right,
Thank
Cher?
you.
They're like so creative, like colorful. Just they're so fun to look at. I don't know. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, right? So I grew up with comics in the newspaper.
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
In comics, I couldn't wait for like Family Circus to come out. Like I'm so freaking,
Right.
but like,
Oh yeah, I mean, but I
it.
too, yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
know. I don't even think I would. I actually was recently talking at a middle school about comics, and I said like what I do didn't exist when I was growing up. I didn't see
right.
the only comics we saw were like superhero comic books and comics in the newspaper. We didn't know you could make a graphic memoir about motherhood. That wasn't a thing. So I'm also very lucky to live in this time where we care so much about the visual, and we're all really interested in telling stories in a visual way because that I think was really different when we were younger.
It is so creative and it's so raw and honest. And I wonder what your response was like at that time when you started.
Mhm.
Did you get like an influx of like, sorry, there's an animal behind me. That's my dog. He's just here.
Really cute though.
Did did you get this like influx of response from moms who were like, yes, like I feel the exact same way, and you got this idea that like many moms and women were feeling seen.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, and that's really, I was making them. At the time I was still sharing. I'm also a yoga teacher. I was sharing like yoga content and these illustrations about motherhood and regular pictures of my family, all in this personal feed. And I just saw the difference between how people were responding to these
Yeah,
illustrations versus my normal, everything else I was posting. And I started to realize like there's something here. I was seeing them shared far and wide. I was seeing real conversations happening in the comments. And this is before the algorithm became such a nightmare. So, just people were seeing it. And
yeah,
I was like, 2,000, yoga students and people who were following my little blog. It was not a big following, but it was enough to get these conversations going. And so, after about, I think it was like, I guess it was almost a year, I was like, I'm gonna make a separate feed for this. I just feel like it needs to live on its own because it felt like I had just used my Instagram feed was really confusing at that point. It was like yoga and mom comics, and so I just said I'm going to give it its own home, and that way people who are looking for this kind of content can find it. And so that's when I made Mom Life Comics, and it was actually July 2021, so over a year after I started making them. And then it really took off. I think because it was this place where people could come and have the same kind of conversations in lots of different ways and lots of different posts. And yeah, so that was the birth of Mom Life Comics. But it took, it wasn't like it was an overnight success. I mean, it grew quickly, but it wasn't until I had a comic that went, viral, that things really changed for me and kind of led me to where I am now.
motherhood can feel hard because all of a sudden you're doing things that I didn't know that this was a part of it. And where is there support for this? Like, who do I
Yeah.
call about this when my milk supply dries up?
And I think that's what I think we're now 6 years out and from when I started Mom Life Comics, but um, I think we were kind of having this awakening, kind of like our generation, the millennial parents who are all coming up, like we were all having this awakening that I think, women have been having for decades, but we were all coming to this place of saying, like, wait a minute,
Yeah,
this isn't what we thought it would be.
right.
And why is that? And so we had to kind of go through those same conversations that I think feminists and women have been going through for a long time. But I think it was heightened, for so many of us for a lot of reasons, many of them structurally and societally and culturally. We've had these shifts where so many more women are working outside the home, and yet nothing has changed, in 40 years, on the other side, in terms of like having any sort of structural support for daycare and childcare. And, women are still making way less than men and still expected to do way more in the home, and so I think right around the pandemic, this all kind of came to a head for so many of us, and we all started having these conversations out in the open a lot more. And I think social media, in
Mhm.
both good and bad ways, really brought that conversation to light and gave us all a place to have it that we'd never been able to have it before, out in the open. So I'm really thankful for that. And I think it's been really great to be able to talk about it. But I also think it's been really frustrating because we're all learning that we're talking about the same things that women have been talking about for a really long time. And
Yeah.
it's like, how has it still not changed? For me, in my own experience and what I, ended up writing a book about was that I started my parenting journey or my marriage in a very egalitarian relationship. My husband and I was very proud of the fact that we split everything evenly, that we both did the dishes together, that we each did our own laundry, that we would go grocery shopping, together every Sunday. And it felt like, it didn't feel at all like we were in this traditional hetero normative relationship where the man does this and the woman does this. We were so even.
And how
Well,
long have you guys been
yeah.
married before you had kids?
Well, we've been together since I was 18 and I'm 41 now.
Okay.
So a long time. But yeah, we've
Okay.
been together oh gosh, I don't even know. The math is so hard. But we didn't have kids till I was like 30. So yeah, we've been together for 12, 10, 12 years before we had
Yeah.
kids. And
So you had time to establish what that looked like. Yeah.
yeah, and we'd lived together a long time. And so I just felt really confident that like we were this equal team. And then I think what happened and what I've now learned happens to so many of us is that after kids, we just like slowly backslid into much more traditional roles. And I found myself really angry all the time. How did I end up being the one doing all of this? Why is my partner, who was formerly so equal to me in everything, how has he been able to continue sleeping and continue living his life while my whole life has been turned upside down? Not to say his hadn't been, but it was the difference was so extreme. And
Mhm.
so that was a big part of why I started making these comics too, was I was really angry. I felt like I was tricked. Not, I don't know by who, but I felt like this is not, I thought we were in this together and I am doing so much more and I'm so mad at him, despite loving him very much and despite him doing, as we all like to say, like so much more than men of past generations did. It's not like he was changing diapers with me. It's not like he wasn't. It's not like he was, he wasn't just disappearing. I mean, he was there, but
Mhm.
because of, I mean, I could go on and on, but because of so many of these expectations of moms in our culture, and because of so much of the messaging we both got from our parents, from, his workplace, their expectations of him versus me being self-employed and the expectations I felt of, needing to do everything as a mom who had a flexible schedule, but all of this played into this fact that I ended up, a few years into motherhood, looking around and going like, what happened to that modern feminist egalitarian relationship that I had? How did I get here? And why? And so that's really kind of what I've been exploring in my comics ever since. Our kids are a lot older. We've come a long way. We've made a ton of changes, and I'm really proud of that. But it's still not totally equal for so many reasons.
You have this really great comic, which I love. It's a side by side picture, and
Mhm.
it's a man with like an ergo pushing a stroller. It says "Daddy Daycare," and on the
Yeah.
other side, a mom pushing a stroller with a kid in an ergo, and it says "Mom Life."
That was the comic that went viral. Well, not that one, but I did a series of these double standards, and it shows a
Yeah.
mom and a dad doing the exact same thing.
Mhm.
And the mom is labeled in a negative way, and the dad is labeled in a positive way. So, I have one where it's like the first one I did actually ever was a mom and a dad, and they're each coming into the house holding a bag of fast food. And above the mom, it says lazy mom, and above the dad, it says fun dad, right? So, like, dad's bringing home fast food, and it's like, woohoo. And mom brings it home, and it's like, oh my God, she's so lazy tonight. That was really kind of that's what went viral, and what I still feel like, people find me through a lot is this idea of these double standards.
Yeah, you call it comics. What's brilliant about this is the irony of it all. Irony is funny. Just like, wow, isn't that ironic?
Hmm.
It's a little bit there's a bit of comedy to that because you almost can't believe that that's the reality.
Yeah. And I think people look a lot of times at, I do a lot of these comics where I'm kind of flipping, they're flipping what they're saying, flipping the script. And, I love it when even women and moms look at this and say like, oh my gosh, this made me like, I had to stop and think because it felt so backwards to me. But they, when you have these awakenings of realizing what kind of just the messaging that we're living with that we don't even realize we're internalizing and how much that affects us as moms and as people. And I think, the idea of like, mom guilt that so many of us feel guilty no matter what choices we make. We think they're all wrong. All of that is so one-sided. Dads and most men don't really struggle with that. And I think we just don't even realize it because it's just such a constant kind of noise in our minds. And it's this thing we're living with that our male counterparts usually are not or have on a much lesser degree.
Creative Mamas Unplugged is produced by Breathe Easy Productions with music by Jeremy Jurin. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to give my mama 5 stars and keep coming back. Thanks to us kids, there are plenty of stories to tell. And you are not alone.
We are inspired by you. Thank you for joining our Creative Mamas community. Support Creative Mamas Unplugged on Patreon to get your name in the credits, receive extra content, and earn some fun prizes. With this, we can keep creating, uplifting, and growing this incredible community together. We love you so much. Applause.
Can you see this? Can you see what? You know I'm in the middle of a pod, right? You know I'm in the middle of recording. You see that? I love you.